fun.
All right. Okay, there we go. Okay, all right. I am with Herb Nelson and a Fife native. And so tell us a little bit about yourself, Herb.
Well, I was born in Tacoma. We lived up in Federal Way for until 1941. Came down to Fife in 41, and my dad built a house down there in 1941. So I spent the first 4 years of school at Federal Way, and then the rest of my schooling came out at Fife. Grade school, high school, and trade schools and stuff like that. So
And that was off of Willow Road, right?
Willow
You-
Road,
You
right.
lived off of Willow Road, okay.
yeah.
All right. And what kind of things what do you remember about the area when you first moved here to Fife?
Well, it was pretty much farm country in those days. You know, there was dairy farms and berry farms and things like that. In fact, my grandpa had a little farm down in the valley here, berry farm for years and years. And I thought, now how many times did I sit at Grandpa's house and look up top the hill and wonder what's going on top of the hill? Because those days probably wasn't anything up here outside of, a few people up here.
Right.
But there were some old timers up Pendle. Pendles lived up here years ago. Pendle, and this road used to be Pendle Lang Road, till the county decided they're going to change it to 58th Avenue and take that away from there. But on Google, it's still 15th Avenue, Pendle Lang Road, so it's still got the history going there.
Was that named after somebody, Pendle Land?
There's
or
Pendles live down in the corner down there.
Okay.
Old, a brother and two sisters, if I remember right, and they inherited a farm and had a little dairy farm and raised cows and hay, and there's a lot of independent little farms in those days. You know, you raised all your chickens, you raised your eggs, and you raised your cows, and you grew a garden and had fruit trees, and you were pretty much, outside of going to town and buy some salt and flour, you were pretty much independent. Okay. That's, I think back about the old days when my grandpa had a place up on the hill, or the new Federal Way, or the new Walmart store in Federal Way, up on top of that hill. He had a little ranch up there of 20 acres, and I had a bunch of his wife's family lived down on the hill. The freeway went through their property now, and I can remember those days when he was the same way. He had chickens and cows and pigs, and canned all our fruit, and went to town, like I say, bought salt and flour and baking soda and new pair of pants once in a while when they could afford it.
Yeah. Well, how old were you when you first moved out here then?
Down to Fife?
Yeah, down to Fife.
About 13, I think.
Okay, 13. Yeah. And then I know you mentioned you from Tacoma.
I was born in Tacoma, but I was raised up in Federal Way.
Yeah. And so parents just decided, maybe a little bit more land or a little. What was your?
I don't remember what was going on there for sure. My dad worked for a company called Fife Builder Supply, and they were right down in the valley. Well, in fact, where the new fire station is down in Fife was where Fife Builder Supply was, okay. And he worked for them. So I think to get closer to work, he decided to build a house down there and settle down to something permanent. I think if I remember, we rented before that different houses up on top of our other place we lived. So he built a house down there in 1941, because I remember that was we were just finishing up the plumbing when the war broke out down there.
Oh.
Because my uncle and my dad were plumbing the house, and they happened to have the radio on. All of a sudden we got the announcement that we were in deep trouble. So then he had to go to work he stayed with that Fife Builder Supply, and then he had to go to work for Western Boat, because deferments, they were deferred. Married people were deferred, and married with children were deferred, and then all of a sudden it got tighter and tighter, so he went to work for Tacoma Boat to stay around town until then the war ended, and he got out of Tacoma Boat. So, but that was a long time ago.
What's down in the area where you grew up? Is there anything?
The house is still there.
It's still
all
there.
the houses are there.
Okay.
Yeah. They've built a few new ones down there since I was there, but it's pretty much stayed a kind of a rural area for small families, and again, that whole area around me were all truck gardens and dairy farms when I was growing up. So we got to go out and work in the gardens or working for farmers during making hay during the summer, and learned a lot of different things. Yeah. Learned how to drive hay trucks, tractors, and learned how to weed corn and hoe corn and weed carrots. And
what was your address?
Oh golly, it was we just had it the other day. Route 1, box 134, I think it was. if I remember right, years ago. And it wasn't Willows Road at that time, it was a route. And
It was
then
a
I
route.
don't remember when it came to, I don't think Fife did it, but at some time or another, they decided to change it to Willows Road. And that was, I think the rest of them kept 54th, and they kept 20th, and they kept everything else for 70th, but for some reason, somebody wanted Willows Road, so we got it.
Changes to that. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll throw out a name. Is his name Hans Fremke?
Yeah.
Does that name sound familiar to
Yeah.
you? What do you remember about him?
He was a nice old German fellow, didn't speak much English, but he was a bachelor, lived up back behind us. He'd built a house and a shop back behind us, and when we got down there, he had been there for at least quite a few years because he had big apple trees and prune trees and things like that. Again, that was part of the old country of growing your own fruit and your own vegetables, and he had a big grape arbor. I don't think he ever made wine, but the kid used to go there and sneak grapes once in a while from him. Yeah. But he was a pretty good guy. He used to walk up to the store every once a week or something like that and buy groceries and come back. But he was pretty much kept pretty quiet over there in his backyard. And I knew just a little bit about him, that he'd been up to Mount Rainier, built some of the buildings and some of the artifacts up there in that old building up there.
At Paradise.
At Paradise, yeah. But there was a few pictures that he had, and he, like, see, we were pretty young then. When you're young, you're not that interested in what's happening with the older group per se. You know, once in a while you get a little bit of that stuff, but to go hang out with them, that wasn't wave and hi, and that was about, but you weren't hanging out and trying to learn everything about them per se. You'd get a little bit as time went on, years went on, you'd get a little bit from them, things like that. But he's a good gentleman.
I know that.
Yeah.
Did he have any kids or anything? Did you say he was a bachelor?
He was a bachelor. I don't remember him having any relatives here in the area. He could have. Again, that's one of the things you don't get into per se. But he was just a good neighbor, good quiet neighbor. I can remember he had a big bushy beard, like a typical German with a big bushy beard, and a mustache, and kind of a hat on all the time. And he used to read a lot. I remember that. Like he had a picture windows in front of his house like this here, and you'd see him at his desk or table, and he'd be reading, newspapers or whatever he had there to read. So, gotcha. But a good old gentleman.
You know if his house is still there?
No, it's gone.
It's gone.
I don't remember when it was. I think it was gone when we left there. When I rented, when we got married, I rented my mom's house for a couple of years. Hans's house wasn't there, was it, Connie? Oh, gee, yeah. So I don't think it was there. In fact, a friend of mine, a guy by the name of Fritz Boren, bought his old house and shop, and then they tore it down and put a big steel building up there. He's got stuff stored in it now. And Fritz is gone. His son's got I think his son's still got all of Hans's old carving tools and things like chisels and stuff like that. I remember he had a big chest about this square, just stacked up full of chisels and tools and hammers and a lot of stuff that fancy special tools he made himself. In the old days you couldn't run to Lowe's and get a screwdriver if you wanted. You made one out of something or other, or if you had a tool, a special carving tool, you forged it and ground it and made it yourself. But he was a nice gentleman. Yeah.
Very cool. All right. So I understand you graduated high school.
Correct.
In 1949.
Correct.
What were some of the groups and activities that you were involved in while you were?
I didn't get in much. I went to work at the Poodle Log when I was about 14 years old, so I didn't do much as far as sports running at school. We did class activities and the local dances and stuff like that. But I was working quite a bit at the time, and I didn't get involved in it. And that time there wasn't much outside of sports. And of course there was, I think, a glee club and there was a little drama club, and there were some language clubs there at that time, but I can't remember all of them.
Okay. What are some of your school memories as far as some of the teachers, administrators that kind of stand out to you?
Well, they're all all a good bunch of people. There were a lot of, there's one lady probably everybody will talk about is Miss Lindstrom. She was an English teacher, and she'd been there for quite a few years and was just an inspiration to all the kids, whether you're a boy or a girl or didn't make a difference or race or anything like that.
What was Mrs. Lindsom's
she
first
was-
name? Do you remember?
Oh my golly, she was always Miss Lindstrom.
I know.
I can tell you her name. It'll come to me one of these days. I can't. But they were Mr. and Mrs. Miss Lindstrom and Mr. Belknap, or Mr. Vincent and Mrs. Vincent, or so and so. So you didn't even think about their first name, unless under your breath,
Right.
But they were all good teachers. Miss Lindstrom was an inspiration of just about everybody there. Belknap was our principal. He was very fair and very firm. There was no, you didn't get away with much with him. And teachers were kind of like mothers. They had eyes in the back of the head. They always knew what was going on back 3 rows behind them. So that's one thing I thought about teachers. They were always pretty sharp and on top of what was going on, and they knew what was going on, and so they kind of blended what was going on with what they were trying to teach, and they didn't get too, I guess emotional is a word about some kind of a problem coming up. They could handle it. They were, very, very good people. Good people.
Did you attend any of the football or basketball games?
Oh yeah, I did as much as that I could. Yeah.
What were they like? What was your?
Well, in those days, the Fife was the biggest school in our league. And so we played a little town called Yelm, a little town called Kapowitz, a little town called Ording. And all they could do to get 11 guys on a football team was go down in the 8th grade and get some kid to play. Fife had a full-blown high school, so we had a lot of big kids in high school. So Fife was pretty dominant for many, many years because of that, because we were larger than most of. Then we got in once in a while, and we used to play like Clover Park, something like that, and we got our comeuppance because Clover Park was 3 times as big. We'd come out, wipe the slate clean with us, because we went to state tournaments and things like that, and with a perfect record, and came out of a state tournament with also a perfect record, losing every one of them.
Did a lot of the kids show up then for the games? And
Oh yeah, there was always good attendance. Yeah. We had in those days the field out there was just had been smoothed off and cleaned off. Made a fairly good field, but it had some low spots and some high spots in it. And when it rained hard, there was always some low spots. And when the kid get tackled, he'd slide about 50 yards, towards the goal because it wasn't built up and crowned up like a field was today. But it was fun, and everybody enjoyed it. Raining didn't bother anybody. Fog didn't bother anybody. That slowly over the years they built a new building and new field and new tracks and things like that.
Was there a particular place you guys hung out after the game?
Well, Poodle Dog was one.
Poodle Dog.
Yeah.
Where you worked?
Where I worked. That was one of the places people hung out, and there was a little restaurant called the White Spot, and for us the big hangouts were downtown at the drive-ins theaters or drive-in restaurants. Bevington's, Bush's, and Triple X, and a few others that we used to go out and used to cruise around the building, and look at the girls, and go to the next place and cruise around, look at the girls, and go home and wait for the next week to do.
Where was the Triple X at? That was kind of like an A&W.
That was in Tacoma on Puyallup Avenue.
Puyallup Avenue.
There was 2 of them on Puyallup Avenue there. One of them was the Aberg's office now. It used to be the can't remember the name of the restaurant now, but that was one of them. There was 2 of them almost side by side there, and there was another big one out on South Tacoma Way, and another one way out on South Tacoma Way, if I remember right.
Okay.
But Triple X Barrel, that was a big
thing. Yeah, because you could pull up your car. Very cool.
In fact, I was thinking the other day, I was watching a article on donuts, where the best donuts were. In our day, way out on 6th Avenue, was a place called, Hoyt Donuts. And they made a kind of a crusty, crisp donut out there that they just dipped in powdered sugar. That's the only thing made, was that one. So we used to, as wild guys, we used to go out there and buy a couple of bottles of Coca-Cola and go out and get a dozen donuts, and that was our wild night out at Hoyt Donuts. And that closed down many, many years ago, and he had a recipe for it that nobody's ever found out what the recipe was. It was just that classic. And I was like, when they talk about these soft donuts the other day, I was thinking about that Hoyt donut. I'd love to bite into one of them right now.
And that was on 6th Avenue.
Way out on 6th Avenue, yeah. When I say way out, 6th Avenue, there weren't too many
It's
buildings
kinda
on 6th Avenue those days, but that was the place to go out and hang out and get your donut fix.
Right on. And so you talked about the drive-in. How about the drive-in movie theater there in Fife and the Pickwick?
Yeah.
Were they were pretty.
Well, Pickwick came in 49, and I think the drive-in came in about the same time.
Okay.
And that was kind of the hub of activities for a lot of years.
Gotcha. So that was your senior year when those places
Yeah.
were kind of popping.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Let's see here. What are some of your favorite memories of maybe the drugstores there in Fife? Any doctors or dentists that you went to? Anything stands out?
There was a dentist, Dr. Perosa. There was a doctor, Dr. Kalkas. A drugstore, Ernie Souders, his son Bob ran the drugstore. Of course, Andrews Market was across the way. There was a shoemaker shop on one side of the road there, and then in Andrews Market there was a barber shop on one end, an insurance building. Part of that was an insurance office, and then the rest was all Andrews Market. I'd say Andrews Market too. I worked there one summer for a part-time, where they had replaced a guy, and you got paid in cash then. You got paid in a little brown bag, and if you made $11.32, they counted out $11.32, put it in your brown bag, and the secretary came out and handed it to you, or handed $13.85 to somebody else in that brown bag.
Oh my gosh!
Was the check? It was a brown bag full of cash.
Wow. In that area, that specific area you're talking about is right next to the Poodle Dog in that area, in that general.
Andrews Market was across the street from the Poodle Dog, where the 7-Eleven store is, and there's Verizon store in there.
Okay.
That whole strip across in front of where the 7-Eleven store at one time was all
Gotcha.
Andrews Market.
That was Andrews Market.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
I often